knew, but that's quite by the way. And just at present there's something else, another little matter, upon which I'm wanting to consult you. Ahem. The fact is, well, I happen to be in a slight difficulty, and you can help me out." Redwood raised his eyebrows and was secretly glad. "The matter is highly confidential." "Go on," said Redwood. "Don't worry about that." "I have recently been entrusted with a child, the child of an exalted personage." Winkles coughed. "You're getting on," said Redwood. "I must confess it's largely your powders, and the reputation of my success with your little boy. There is, I cannot disguise, a strong feeling against its use. And yet I find that among the more intelligent one must go quietly in these things, you know, little by little. Still, in the case of Her Serene I mean this new little patient of mine. As a matter of fact, the suggestion came from the parent, or I should never—" He struck Redwood as being embarrassed. "I thought you had a doubt of the advisability of using these powders," said Redwood. "Merely a passing doubt. You don't propose to discontinue, in the case of your little boy? Certainly not. So far as I can see, it would be murder. I wouldn't do it for the world." "You shall have the powders," said Redwood. "I suppose you couldn't—" "No fear," said Redwood. "There isn't a recipe. It's no good, Winkles, if you'll pardon my frankness. I'll make you the powders myself." "Just as well, perhaps," said Winkles, after a momentary hard stare at Redwood. "Just as well. And then—" "I can assure you I really don't mind in the least." 4. When Winkles had gone, Bensigden came and stood on the hearth rug and looked down at Redwood. "Her Serene Highness?" he remarked. "Her Serene Highness," said Redwood. "It's the Princess of Wezir Dryburgh, no further than a third cousin." "Redwood," said Bensigden, "it's a curious thing to say, I know, but do you think Winkles understands—" "What?" "Just what it is we have made?" "Does he really understand," said Bensigden, dropping his voice, and keeping his eye doorward, "that in the family of his new patient—" "Go on," said Redwood. "Who have always been, if anything, a little under—" "The average?" "Yes, and so very tactfully undistinguished in any way, he is going to produce a royal personage, an outsized royal personage of that size, you know, Redwood. I'm not sure whether this is not something almost treasonable." He transferred his eyes from the door to Redwood. Redwood flung a momentary gesture, index finger erect, at the fire. "By Jove!" he said, "he doesn't know." "That man," said Redwood, "doesn't know anything. That was his most exasperating quality as a student. Nothing. He passed all his examinations, he had all his facts, and he had just as much knowledge as a rotating bookshelf containing the Times Encyclopedia, and he doesn't know anything now. He's Winkles, and incapable of really assimilating anything not immediately and directly related to his superficial self. He is utterly void of imagination, and, as a consequence, incapable of knowledge. No one could possibly pass so many examinations and be so well dressed, so well done, and so successful as a doctor, without that precise incapability. That's it, and in spite of all he's seen and heard and been told, there he is. He has no idea whatever what he has set going. He has got a boom on. He's working it well on boom food, and some one has to let him into this new royal baby, and that's boomier than ever. And the fact that Wezir Dryburgh will presently have to face the gigantic problem of a 30-odd-foot princess not only hasn't entered his head, but couldn't. It couldn't." "There'll be a fearful row," said Bensigden, "in a year or so soon as they really see she is going on growing. Unless, after their fashion, they hush it up. It's a lot to hush up. Rather. I wonder what they'll do. They never do anything. Royal tact. They're bound to do something. Perhaps she will. Oh Lord, yes. They'll suppress her. Such things have been known." Redwood burst into desperate laughter. "The redundant royalty. The bouncing babe in the iron mask," he said. "They'll have to put her in the tallest tower of old Wester Dryburgh Castle, and make holes in the ceiling as she grows from floor to floor. Well, I'm in the very same pickle, and Coster and his 3 boys, and—well. There'll be a fearful row," Bensigden repeated, not joining in the laughter. "A fearful row." "I suppose," he argued, "you've really thought it out thoroughly, Redwood. You're quite sure it wouldn't be wiser to warn Winkles, wean your little boy gradually, and rely upon the theoretical triumph? I wish to goodness you'd spend half an hour in my nursery when the food's a little late," said Redwood, with a note of exasperation in his voice. "Then you wouldn't talk like that, Bensigden. Besides, fancy warning Winkles! No, the tide of this thing has caught us unawares, and whether we're frightened or whether we're not, we've got to swim." "I suppose we have," said Bensigden, staring at his toes. "Yes, we've got to swim, and your boy will have to swim, and Coster's boys. He's given it to all 3 of them. Nothing partial about Coster, all or nothing, and Her Serene Highness, and everything. We are going on making the food. Coster also. We're only just in the dawn of the beginning, Redwood. It's evident all sorts of things are to follow, monstrous great things. But I can't imagine them, Redwood, except—" He scanned his finger nails. He looked up at Redwood with eyes bland through his glasses. "I've half a mind," he ventured, "that Caterham is right. At times it's going to destroy the proportions of things. It's going to dislocate. What isn't it going to dislocate?" "Whatever it dislocates," said Redwood, "my little boy must have the food." They heard some one falling rapidly upstairs. Then Costa put his head into the fiat. "Hullo!" he said as their expressions, and entering, "Well?" They told him about the princess. "Difficult question," he remarked. "Not a bit of it. She'll grow. Your boy'll grow. And the others you'll give it to will grow. Everything. Like anything. What's difficult about that? That's all right. A child could tell you that. Where's the bother?" They tried to make it clear to him. "Not go on with it!" he shrieked. "But you can't help yourselves now. It's what you're for. It's what Winkles is for. It's all right. Often wondered what Winkles was for. Now it's obvious. What's the trouble?" "Disturbance? Obviously. Upset things? Upset everything. Finally, upset every human concern. Plays a pikestaff. They're going to try and stop it, but they're too late. It's their way to be too late. You go on and start as much of it as you can. Thank God he has a use for you." "But the conflict," said Bensington. "The stress. I don't know if you have imagined—" "You ought to have been some sort of little vegetable, Bensington," said Coster. "That's what you ought to have been. Something growing over a rockery. Here you are, fearfully and wonderfully made, and all you think you're made for is just to sit about and take your victuals. Do you think this world was made for old women to muff about in? Well, anyhow, you can't help yourselves now. Got to go on." "I suppose we must," said Redwood, slowly. "No!" said Coster, in a huge shout. "No! Make as much as you can, and as soon as you can. Spread it about." He was inspired to a stroke of wit. He parodied one of Redwood's curves with a vast upward sweep of his arm. "Redwood," he said, to point the illusion, "make it so!" 5. There is, it seems, an upward limit to the pride of maternity, and this in the case of Mrs. Redwood was reached when her offspring completed his 6th month of terrestrial existence, broke down his high-class bassinet perambulator, and was brought home, bawling, in the milk truck. Young Redwood at that time weighed 59½ pounds, measured 48 inches in height, and gripped about 60 pounds. He was carried upstairs to the nursery by the cook and housemaid. After that, discovery was only a question of days. One afternoon Redwood came home from his laboratory to find his unfortunate wife deep in the fascinating pages of "The Mighty Atom," and at the sight of him she put the book aside and ran violently forward and burst into tears on his shoulder. "Tell me what you've done to him!" she wailed. "Tell me what you've done!" Redwood took her hand and led her to the sofa, while he tried to think of a satisfactory line of defence. "It's all right, my dear," he said. "It's all right. You're only a little overwrought. It's that cheap perambulator. I've arranged for a bath-chair man to come round with something stouter to-morrow." Mrs. Redwood looked at him tearfully over the top of her handkerchief. "A baby in a bath-chair?" she sobbed. "Well, why not? It's like a cripple. It's like a young giant, my dear, and you've no cause to be ashamed of him. You've done something to him, Dandy," she said. "I can see it in your face." "Well, it hasn't stopped his growth, anyhow," said Redwood heartlessly. "I knew," said Mrs. Redwood, and clenched her pocket handkerchief ball, fashioned in one hand. She looked at him with a sudden change to severity. "What have you done to our child, Dandy?" "What's wrong with him?" "He's so big! He's a monster!" "Nonsense! He's as straight and clean as a baby as ever a woman had. What's wrong with him?" "Look at his size." "That's all right. Look at the puny little brutes about us. He's the finest baby—" "He's too fine," said Mrs. Redwood. "It won't go on," said Redwood reassuringly. "It's just a start he's taken." But he knew perfectly well it would go on, and it did. By the time this baby was 12 months old he tottered just 1 inch under 5 feet high, and scaled 8 stone 3. He was as big, in fact, as a St. Peter's in Vaticano cherub, and his affectionate clutch at the hair and features of visitors became the talk of West Kensington. They had an invalid's chair to carry him up and down to his nursery, and his special nurse, a muscular young person just out of training, used to take him for his airings in a Panhard 8 h.p. hill-climbing perambulator, specially made to meet his requirement. It was lucky in every way that Redwood had his expert witness connection in addition to his professorship. When one got over the shock of little Redwood's enormous size, he was, I am told by people who used to see him almost daily, turf-turfing slowly about Hyde Park, a singularly bright and pretty baby. He rarely cried or needed a comforter. Commonly he clutched a big rattle, and sometimes he went along hailing the bus drivers and policemen along the road outside the railings as Dada and Baba in a sociable, democratic way. "There goes that great boom-food baby," the bus driver used to say. "Looks 'ealthy," the forward passenger would remark. "Bottle-fed," the bus driver would explain. "They say it's old's a gallon and 'ad to be specially made for 'im. Very 'ealthy child, any'ow," the forward passenger would conclude. When Mrs. Redwood realized that his growth was indeed going on indefinitely and logically, and this she really did for the first time when the motor perambulator arrived, she gave way to a passion of grief. She declared she never wished to enter her nursery again, wished she was dead, wished the child was dead, wished everybody was dead, wished she had never married Redwood, wished no one ever married anybody, ajaxed a little, and retired to her own room, where she lived almost exclusively on chicken broth for 3 days. When Redwood came to remonstrate with her, she banged pillows about.